I know she did.
They should, yeah.
She's
It
copied
won't be,
from
and
my
I wouldn't expect it to be in the playoff.
You ready? Fine, thanks.
It's 4 p.m. on Tuesday, November 12th, 2024, and I will call this City Council study session to order. I do want to thank everyone who is joining us possibly online this evening, as we have no one in the audience. But as a reminder, there is no public comment. Councilmember Peretti, if you would lead us in the flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And then I'll just note for the record that all council is here with the exception of Councilmember Cedar and Councilmember White. And then for staff, we have Director Madden, Planning Manager Stallnecker, Interim Director Robeck, Assistant Chief Champagne, and our City Clerk Tricia Summers. Council, we have 4 items this evening for discussion. The first one's on page 3 of your packet. It is a first read of Ordinance 2102-24 for a 2024 budget amendment. I'll turn the floor over to Interim Director Robeck.
Thank you, Council and Mayor. The proposed ordinance provides adjustments to the 2024 budget as adopted by City Council via Ordinance 2079-23 in December. This is the third ordinance amending the 2024 budget and reflects changes that have occurred since adoption of the original budget. These adjustments are detailed in the accompanying exhibits and include a change to the wage scale to reclassify the Public Works Administrative Assistant position to a Public Works Administrative Assistant 2 position at a grade 16. This change reflects a title and compensation commensurate with the additional duties and responsibilities assumed by current staff. A description of the new position is attached as well.
Are there any questions, comments, concerns on this item? Okay. So this will come back. This will come back to next week's council meeting. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
And then if it is passed at next week's council meeting, these budget amendments will be incorporated in the final budget document that to be approved on December 2nd.
That's this year's or next year?
Well, it will show revised next year's budget, but this year before you approve it.
Okay.
That's what you said, correct?
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
okay.
because we do show the 2024 budget numbers in the 2025 budget document.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. So next item this evening is on page 17 of our packet. It is a 2025 preliminary budget discussion. Again, I'll turn the floor over to Interim Director Robeck.
Thank you. As stated in the agenda bill, the 2024 preliminary budget is attached for review and discussion. Also, as noted during the initial presentation of the budget on October 14th, the principal budget changes have been summarized in the mayor's budget message. In addition, a citywide budget summary is included in the introduction, and summarized presentations of the general fund, street fund, criminal justice fund, and utility funds are included throughout the document at the beginning of each fund's detailed budget. Complete lists and descriptions of all proposed projects can be found on the various capital improvement fund budget pages. And the budget will be presented again for discussion on November 18th and for final approval on December 2nd. I don't have a formal presentation for the budget. I was hoping that if you had any questions, concerns, suggestions, that we could discuss them at this time.
Are there, Councilmember Whalen?
Thank you, Mayor, and so forth. Maybe this isn't the actual right place to do this and so forth, but a question or two about parks.
Okay.
Okay. Do we have funds in the budget to correct the items at the 9/11 memorial, which have been identified for the last 3 years? Is there budgeting for the safety items and the mistakes that were made on identifying certain plaques and time? It's been a discussion topic for about 3 years now. And can you help me with that? Because I don't know what the safety items are. And maybe the council would like to know what those are.
Do you want me to answer that question?
That would be.
Okay, and then Director Madden, if I misspeak, can you just interrupt me? So Park Board has made recommendation on the errors at the 9/11 Memorial.
Stair.
Park Board has recommended some adjustments to the 9/11 Memorial based on your feedback on the airplane mistake. And my understanding is that we're looking at the design of that, and it would come out of our park budget.
Now, there was also safety items that was recognized, which I don't know all of them, but I understand there was other safety items, not just the awkward printing that they've had on them. I don't think we've ever discussed exactly what the safety items are. I think they had to do with some of the figures standing. Now, where are we with that? Because we've identified this as safety items. The longer we go, the more liable we are if somebody gets hurt because we've recognized them. And I haven't seen anything done in the last, it's 3 years now, I guess.
Yeah, so WCIA, we talked to them about that topic. Their suggestion was to just install signs. They didn't find that it was a huge safety concern or issue, but they recommend that we look at installing signage. But per Park Board's recommendation, my recollection is that they want to go back to the original design, which was not those figurines. It was more of like a monument placard on the ground, and that's what we're looking at doing. So that would then eliminate us needing to put up signs because they would be lower to the ground and then raised up so we could view the verbiage. So my understanding is that all those figurines, about 4 or 5 of them, would come out and be replaced with the placards.
So, and that'll be done this next year.
I would love for it to be done by,
Well, because we've known it about 3 years.
yeah.
And the longer we know about it, the higher our liability is if something happens to someone, in a safety item particularly. So I just want to protect the city from that occurring.
Yeah. It's on the list. I'm assuming it will happen next year. I know it's going to be, to be honest, it's going to be a little bit of a contentious subject because we had such pushback when we talked about removing one of the figurines. So we're really trying to be cautious as we go through this process.
Caution is good, safety is better.
Okay. But yeah, it will come out of the parks budget.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. I just didn't see anything referencing to that, or did we discuss much in referencing to it for this year? No, thank you.
Depending on the cost, it may or may not come back to council. I can't, you want to speak on that?
Just quickly, Park Board's preference is the council is the final approval on placard wording. They endorsed the removal of the metal statues, and safety concern was if somebody falls on a metal statue, which is would take some doing, and there was not a significant safety risk identified there outside of putting signage up that says view at your own risk, or please be careful. But yes, that will be going back to council for final approval on the placard wording.
Okay. And of course, the attorneys would approve that also, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions on the 2025 proposed budget? Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. It was, if you go to page 42, I like seeing at least that the revenues and the expenditures are, are tracking pretty close to each other. Do you feel that the revenue could actually outpace the expenditures?
And are you referring to the?
General fund summary?
Okay, perfect. I wanted to make sure we were on the same page. That they are currently outpacing, or?
Well, you have it, or it's forecasted that that the revenue is 17%, and that's above,
Okay,
correct?
yes, I'm following.
And then the expenditures are 20%.
Right. And so you're just asking if those numbers still look good to me?
Yeah,
The
yeah.
2025 in particular.
Correct.
They do, and on another I guess another note, the last 2 months of sales taxes that have come in have been higher than historical. I know we've talked about the sales taxes previously, and surprisingly, the last 2 months have come in higher. So that's a good thing. Also, when I was preparing the property tax levy, we had a very large increase in assessed valuation. So I think we're going to see property taxes, the raw dollars of property taxes go up as well. Some of these numbers, when I budgeted them, were on the conservative side. So I do think that the actuals that come in, I anticipate that they'll be higher than
Okay.
those budgeted numbers.
Because if I remember right, weren't the last couple of years about the same, tracking about the same as what you have for next year?
Yes, and then the primary reason that those numbers are so close are those sales taxes. For the 2025 budget, I lowered that number, anticipating that those sales taxes will be lower. So it makes the total revenues look
Okay.
very similar to previous
Okay.
years. Did I answer
Yeah,
your
yeah.
question? Okay.
Yeah, under promise and over deliver. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments, questions from council? Councilmember Whalen?
Forgive me, I'm bringing my hearing aid back into play here and so forth. And I don't know if this is yet an answerable question or not, but in sales taxes, why is it $388,000 less than it was in 2023, 24? What's happened in the city that has changed that profile?
I really need to dig into the detailed numbers on that. So I still need to get access to the system to figure out exactly what either industries or particular entities are basically creating that sales taxes this year in 2024 are just coming in much lower than the previous 2 years. So we need to drill down on that. It's the way that the reports are in the system, it can take a little bit of time, and I anticipate doing that, just haven't had the chunk of time to get that done, but I need to do that and would like to do that. So I don't know specifically why the numbers have been lower in 2024 than 2023 and 2022. I anticipate that some of that is the economy in general. I anticipate that there are certain businesses in the city that were contributing to those higher sales taxes that most likely felt a hit this year, like in boats, vehicles, trailers. We have a couple of those businesses that were really contributing to the higher sales taxes in previous years. So I think it's a real combination of things, but we just need to, I anticipate here at the end of the year having a little bit of time to really drill down on those, get access to those detailed numbers, and figure out exactly what drove those lower amounts. Like I said, the last 2 months have been more in line with what we saw in 2022 and 2023. So we will come back to you with more detailed information as to why exactly that is. The numbers that we are seeing, like I said, are much higher than the 2021. So we're still higher than we were, just not as high as 2022 and 2023.
And it's just a question to see how the city moves and changes a little bit. This is a fairly substantial number going into, and it may just be information hasn't reached you yet, or the final numbers may not have. But it would also be nice to know, and I know you can't say a whole lot, but what portion or what part of our identity as far as taxes and sales taxes and so forth may have changed their complexity within the city of Milton. And well, if you drive around town over the last 4 years and so forth, you can't think that it's not as much as it used to be, but you don't know, I don't know what the product is that's contributing to this declining number. So that information would be very valuable, I think, to council for future considerations.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Interim Director Robeck, didn't we see a huge increase in sales tax during the bridge development?
Yes, and
So that could be part of it.
That contributed to it. There have been larger developments, particular new businesses, industries, the general economy. I think that there is a variety of factors. Also, now that bridge development is starting to have tenants in those buildings, we will most likely see some increases there as well. Like we talked about, I think during the second quarter financial report, even though we're seeing a little bit of a dip in those sales taxes, we saw a really good bump in some building and planning fees that actually more than compensated for those little bit lower sales taxes. So luckily, revenue in general in the general fund was still higher than we expected in 2024.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Interim Director Robeck? Mayor Protem?
Thank you. Because I think you have in the past, you've given us general breakdowns by industry of percentage of sales tax from, correct?
Yes.
That's what
We actually, like I said, the reporting that we have direct access to is a little bit clunky. Like you have to run it by month and by NAICS code, and to really get down to it. So I believe when we actually called the Department of Revenue and asked for our top 10 sales taxpayers when we provided that. But there were a couple, like I had mentioned previously, there were at least one or two on that list that were in industries that we know have been impacted by inflation and the economy. So I suspect that that is contributing to this as well.
Any other questions for Interim Director Robeck? Okay, as she stated, this will come back again next week, at next week's council meeting. And do we have a public hearing next week, or is that?
Yes,
Okay, and a public hearing next week.
I know we've had so many here. What's next?
Council, moving on to our next item this evening. It is on page 103 of the packet. It is a GMA update for the comp plan. I will turn the floor over to Planning Manager Stallnecker.
Good afternoon. So yeah, just wanted to continue to give updates. As we are getting close to the end of the year, we still have a goal to get the comp plan and hopefully also the related development codes adopted by the end of the year. And so the first item tonight for me is just kind of an update on the comp plan portion of that, and the idea that a few weeks ago we'd received an email, as well as we received public testimony at a previous meeting of an agent representing the property owner. If you can look on the agenda item or agenda summary, there is a piece of property that is outlined. It's currently zoned M1, which is light manufacturing, which really is not a good fit considering that there are apartments, condos, and the whole stretch of that is trying to be a much more commercial thoroughfare or higher end, higher density end of apartments. And so when the Planning Commission was reviewing it, the initial suggestion was neighborhood commercial, which was a new zone or a new designation that we were looking at to kind of allow commercial to maybe those surrounding areas. After some conversations with the specific property owner, they had requested that instead of the neighborhood center, which is sort of a lower moderate commercial zone, that it be rezoned, if we had to rezone it, to uptown mixed use. And so I've included the two maps here. One kind of zooms in on it. The other shows that all the property south of it is being proposed for, again, that uptown mixed use. He is, he's very comfortable with that. He was very, he has a lot of ideas of what might, it could include some more intense multifamily, which would fit very nicely in that area. Like I said, both to the east and I think even a little bit to the west, there's multifamily. And then with the, is that 27th, 28th? I think it's 28th. That road would be very sufficient. We're hoping to continue to improve that, which would make that a residential, more of a residential street, which it would work for that. When he was looking previously at industrial uses, that street would not handle it. The neighbors were very concerned about any sort of industrial use that would be coming off of that property and anything that might come on that property. So just wanted to, again, I had said that I would give you a little more information on that property. And if there's no objections, staff will be happy to make that change to the draft, which again, it would make that area uptown mixed use, which is a continuation of what's to the south of it.
Are there any, Councilmember Whalen?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. But just a question, what's the opinion from the Planning Commission on this?
We brought it up to the Planning Commission as well, and they did not have any concerns. The Planning Commission has been very good at trying to balance what property owner, if we can fit what a property owner would like to do with what we feel is a good plan overall from the city. But they are aware that of that request, and as we've been dealing with the zoning, and we've been assuming that that change is going to happen.
So would it be right to expect some decision directly from the Planning Commission saying they have no objection to this to be included in our consideration?
I was not planning on that, as the City Council does have the right to, based on public testimony and different things, make amendments to what the Planning Commission has. But if the council would like that, I can request it.
I think this falls within their preview, and I'd like to understand how their concerns are, what their recommendation might be with this. I think it's appropriate that the council has received that in the past on many items, and I don't find any reason not to do that. That's my offer, and I'd like to hear from the Planning Commission on a change for planning within the city of Milton, which is what their purview is for everything that occurs in the city. And it would be nice to know their involvement with understanding this. It's just not the onus on council, but I think their judgment is valuable, and their concerns might be very valuable to what we do in the future.
Again, just to make sure that I was clear, it was discussed at Planning Commission, and the subsequent zoning that, thank you, corresponds with this. So the Planning Commission tomorrow night, the plan would be to forward the zoning portion, and the zoning portion that the Planning Commission has been discussing would be the uptown mixed use for that area. So I guess I would infer that since they are comfortable with that as the zoning, they are assuming that the council will mesh the comp plan. But as we're meeting tomorrow night, there's nothing that I can't take an unofficial head count, and pass that on at the next meeting.
Well, it would be nice to have an official head count of what the Planning Commission determines from this. It's just so we are so very dependent and thankful for the Planning Commission and their judgment that it would be nice to have it in writing from the Planning Commission through your department, so that we're all on the same page, you might say.
Councilmember Peretti?
So, Councilmember Whalen, I'm trying to understand your request. Again, can you restate it a different way so I can understand it?
Please repeat that. I've got one hearing aid out tonight, and it's going to be a little difficult for me. But I think the Planning Commission on zoning and types of use in a particular area is generally involved with all of those decisions, or at least a subsequent comment from that commission is an appropriate thing for council to receive. Doesn't mean we even have to agree with it or not agree with it, but I'd just like to hear from that body what their thoughts are.
Like individually or as a group? Or, so what I'm confused with is that we discuss many zones and many different type of regulations that come through the Planning Commission, and I always make it a point to ask the director, has this gone through Planning Commission, and is this what their agreement amongst that group as wanting to do? It's not always a majority, but I always ask, did the majority of the group understand this and they're behind this? Is that what you're asking?
Well, the majority of the group should be that's the answer of a group when the majority makes a determination. And I'd just like to be sure that they're all involved with this, all understanding, and that we can depend upon the fact that they were involved, informed, and see the vision that they're going to potentially agree to.
And do you have some reason to feel that they're not involved in this?
I would like, oh, no, but I'd just like to see it in writing. From the group, I'd like to see their opinion. And I don't think that's an inappropriate thing to ask for, especially to a group that advises us in some of their decisions. And I don't see why it would be troubling to anybody to go through that particular procedure with this particular question.
Can I ask a question or clarification?
Sure.
Just to help move this along. So, Councilmember Whalen, if Planning Manager Charles Necker adds this to tomorrow's agendas and it's a majority approval from the Planning Commission that this is okay, are you okay with it then? That's what
Yes.
direction we need.
Yes.
Okay.
But with clarification, I'd like to understand all of their decision-making process and so forth. It may be a majority, but is it a 1 majority, or is it a 6 majority, or just what? I trust that group immensely.
Yeah.
And I'd just like to have more, what you might say, information flow to understand what they decided, what they discussed, and why this significant change in this particular neighborhood, considering where it's located, is totally acceptable by the majority of the Planning Commission.
Okay.
That's all.
So
It's just-
majority would be 4 or more. So if 4 or more are okay with this, you're okay with moving forward?
Don't think I'd have a reason not to be.
Okay, okay. So can we go on that assumption for the discussion that, let's just assume at this point for discussion purposes that majority of the Planning Commission approves this? Do you have any questions or concerns based on that they are okay with it? Would you have any questions or concerns?
And just to comment on that, I think almost everything we get from the Planning Commission is based upon a majority.
Yes.
That's fine.
Or we tell you it's not majority. I mean, it didn't pass, or,
But then we have a chance to say yes, no, or indifferent and so forth.
yeah.
But just to have that line of, you might say, documentation saying that, okay, the majority said this is a good to go. We still have the option of discussing it, but it would just be nice to have that in writing to the council like we do with most other things that come from the Planning Commission.
So what I'm hearing is that I will tomorrow night, as part of our discussion, verify what the Planning Commission feels, some sort of vote on if they are comfortable recommending this change to the city council. I will include, assuming that that is positive, which I would believe it will be, then I will include this change in the future draft that will be brought back to council with identifying in the staff report that we took a vote and what that vote was.
Which is the common way we do things in most of these particular cases, and I don't see why that's not relevant in this case.
Okay. Councilmember Strader?
I'm guessing that you're also looking for maybe if there's anybody that's opposed, or if the commission has concerns, what those concerns were, and how that played a part in their decision. Is that what, kind of what
I
you're
think that's the same thing we ask for of everything that comes through the planning commission. This should be no different in its case.
But you're asking for a report from the commission?
No, I'm asking for the same thing that we received on most other decisions from the planning commission, what their thoughts were, and what the net outcome of the majority of the vote is, and move on with it,
Okay.
but not with nothing. That's just the way I feel.
I think myself and Planning Manager Stalnaker understand. I also just want to note too that the Planning Commission meetings are online, so if you ever want more detail, you're more than welcome to watch those on your own time. So those are always there and available. Any other questions on this agenda item? Okay. Moving on to the next and final one. It's on page 105 of your packet. Yep.
I had a question on page.
The last
It was
agenda.
the reduction of the,
We're just now starting that.
Yeah,
item,
we're not on that item yet.
oh, okay.
Councilmember Strader, so.
Okay.
We'll go through all of those slides.
Okay, all right.
So the next item is on page 105 of your packet. It is the GMA Update Development Code. I'll turn the floor back over to Planning Manager Stalnaker for her review.
So yes, I wanted to, again, trying to keep the city council up to date on where we're at since it's such a sort of rush to the end. So phase one is the comp plan, which we are really close, and hopefully in December, the plan is to have public hearing and action. Tomorrow night, the Planning Commission, they've held their public hearing. They're hoping to, staff is hoping that they will have action. It's on the agenda for action on the various zoning and development code changes, as well as the zoning map that specifically tie back to both the comp plan rechanges and state requirements. And so tonight, I just want to give, basically, I'm going to use the slides that Framework used a couple meetings ago with the Planning Commission to get you a feel of where we're going, so that when you get the full packet, you'll at least kind of have a generalized feel. Some of these, like I said, they're still working on it. I don't know if all of these numbers will stay exactly as they are. But so far, we've had a couple meetings on them, and so I just wanted to kind of go through the overview. So first of all is simply, we're going to go through the basics of the current zoning map, land development. Anyway, we'll go through the various things. I wanted to also, in here is a proposed zoning map, but it didn't have all the new zoning names. So if you want to take one of the larger ones, there are some changes to the labeling, and so I wanted to make sure that everyone kind of sees where we're going with that. So right now, we have sort of our single-family residential and our medium-density residential. And so the proposal is to go with what we're calling Neighborhood Residential 1 and Neighborhood Residential 2. Those zones are very similar in the fact that they're predominantly single-family duplexes. There's a few opportunities in the NR2, which is currently medium density, for some a little bit higher with a conditional use. But so again, just naming wise, looking at your zoning map, those are what those are being changed to. Colors are, for the most part, those areas are not changing, I'm trying to think if there's any, if they're changing, they would have been identified in the future land use. I don't believe anything in those two zones, actual parcel-wise, is changing on the map. We've also got a couple new zones. So we're keeping the business district on 99. That's the bright red. The hope is that in the next year or two, we'll be able to do what's called a sub-area plan, where we will dig in deeper on that specific area and really work with those businesses, those residents, to really figure out what the vision could be for 99. So for now, we're not doing a lot of changes, just more highlighting that's an area we would like to dig in a little bit better. We're keeping the community facilities, keeping the M1 light manufacturing. The mixed-use town center, for consistency's sake, we're flip-flopping it, and it's going to be town center mixed use. And so the abbreviation is on there, I believe, is TCMX. The light pink is what we're calling neighborhood commercial. The idea is that it's going to be sort of a lower intense commercial. The idea that there would be things that more serve that immediate neighborhood, not necessarily pull from outside. And then there could also be some maybe second floor residential or maybe some residential on the back, but it's a much lower intensity area. Open space. And then currently our multifamily, we're just renaming it urban residential multifamily, so URM. And then the bottom is the uptown mixed use. So right now, everything in the town that's commercial is zoned business. And so we've broken that up. And so we've taken the area that's currently identified as the uptown district, as well as added some area to the north and the south. And that whole stretch is that uptown mixed use. That's that area that, and again, we'll kind of revisit it as we go through the tables. But those are the areas that are intended to have higher density for both commercial and for residential, be much more pedestrian scale. And so this is the general map that the Planning Commission has been working with. And like I said, it lines up with our future land use map. So if we go to the next page, it just identifies the the use table. We are revising the use table. A lot of our current uses are out of date. Certain things aren't identified. And so the Planning Commission is, we're going through identifying those. In some ways, we're sort of consolidating like uses, removing things that are obsolete, but we're also making a much fuller list of things that we want to make sure it's clear are prohibited in the city. So we don't have that yet for council, but I just want to let you know that we're working on that. And then as we go in through the development tables, the highlights are that we've added the new zoning districts. There is some density that has changed, and we'll discuss that. We'll do reminders of that based on the comprehensive plan growth targets. There are some requirements for religious organization density bonuses, and obviously with middle housing and ADUs, there's some changes there. So if we turn to page, well, depending on what you're looking at, 6 or 112 is the land development dimensions table, and it's, so that's our existing. If you go down to the next page, it shows what's being proposed. So it gives you a little bit of you can kind of compare the two. So again, we've added the uptown mixed use, the neighborhood commercial. Some of these, like I said, some of the numbers are the same. Again, reminding you that with the new middle housing and the ADU bills, that it's when we deal with what we're calling density for single family or in our neighborhood residential 1 and 2, that the it's dwelling units per lot, it's not per acre, that you are required to do 3 dwelling units per lot. That can either be a single family and 2 ADUs or a duplex and 1 ADU. So that's why that looks different. And then again, it's identifying that the state passed that if a religious organization, they have density bonus, so if they earn certain land, if they own certain land and they want to, it has to be for low income, they are granted some density bonuses. So I can stop there and identify if there's any questions.
Councilmember Strader.
I have a significant question on page 7. You reduced the lot size to 60 feet, and I just wrote this out. The proposed land development table on page 7, the minimum lot width would be 75, went from 75 feet to 60 for all lots zoned in residential single family. This is the only width change to exist on the table. That change will have a significant impact on a large portion of Milton. On my street alone, it'll allow every lot to short plot, going from 24 lots to 48 lots. Multiply that by every street south of Milton Way, and this is a huge impact and have an insert on the end. I'd like to see the analysis with the facts and data of how such dramatic change will affect Milton. There should be a robust discussion on pros and cons, and there should be a concerted effort to notify citizens that they're included in it, since it will be a dramatic effect what the future of Milton will look like. How many lots will be affected? I'd like to see an overlay of the map with which change applied to, and know the potential impact. What impact will it have on services? Did the Planning Commission discuss the lot widths change? What were their feelings on it? And I couldn't find anything in the recording on it, so I'd be interested to know what they had to say. In discussion to the community, to insert such drastic development change on a plan that's been in the works since 2021, and I hate to see this thing get rushed when there's that alone, that change, that 60-foot change is very significant. So that would be my concern.
I guess I would point out a couple things. One, that so far the Planning Commission has not, they've gone through these pages a couple times, and so far there hasn't been, I don't know if there's been any discussion on that reduction, so we'll see what happens tomorrow night. But I guess I would say the minimum lot size is not changing. The minimum lot area is still 8,000 square feet. So if you were going to subdivide, it would, in most cases, you couldn't, if your lot is only 16,000, whether your lot width is 60 or 75, you can only split it into two because of the minimum lot width. Because of the minimum lot area, which is 8,000 square feet. That's the bigger indicator. What the minimum lot width does is there are, 75 is actually a very large width for lots. I think, and I would have to see what I know Framework has done some research. I do believe that there are a lot of lots within Milton that are a lot less than 75 that are existing, so it would still keep within the neighborhood culture and design. There are lots of things that we are changing for various reasons. That's why we did start in 2021 with public meetings. Everything's available on the website. We've had multiple public hearings. We've been at every Milton Days to let people know that things are changing. And so, again, it's something the Planning Commission tomorrow night hopefully will make a recommendation, and that'll be one of those recommendations. But I don't think, well, it theoretically could make a lot that didn't necessarily have as much frontage now have the frontage necessary, but if it doesn't have the total square footage, it wouldn't be able to subdivide. So it's not drastically increasing the number of lots that could be built.
Well, as I said, in my neighborhood, all those lots are 90 by 210. Every single one of those lots would be able to subdivide with, if that stands.
If they're, you said they're 90 by 110,
210.
210 being the depth,
Yeah,
and
210
90
deep,
being the width.
90 feet.
Yes, so to subdivide, you would need 120. Because you need two, they both have to be legal, so they would both have to be 60. Or you could do, I guess, a flag lot, which you could do as well, so.
Well, is there anything in state law that requires us to change the lot size?
No,
So
So
why,
it-
why was this included?
because we are doing the state law, but we are also looking at this is an opportunity to look at everything that hits in these codes. So while that may not be directly state law, it does allow, there are circumstances where, yes, it may make something that before didn't have enough frontage but had enough square footage now be able to subdivide. I don't think it's not going to be a ton of lots, but there are a few lots that, we had a couple that previously did variances because they were like at 72 or 68, but they had more than enough for 8,000. So that would, and when they did those variances, they did the studies around them, and most of the lots around them were closer to 60, 65. So in some aspects, it will allow a few to subdivide that previously didn't. And so that is, I'm sure, part of the thinking.
I'm sorry, did I hear you correctly? The street that Councilmember Strader's referring to, they would not be able to subdivide anyways at 60. Is that what I heard you say?
So they might be able to, I don't know if they might be able to do flag lots, but they could not, to be able to take a lot and divide it up the half for frontage, you would have to have 60 and 60, so you'd have to have 120 frontage. If you're saying you have 90, then yes, maybe you could do a flag lot, and maybe before you wouldn't be allowed to do a flag lot. But again, that's if the property owner decided to. You could do a 30-foot, and you could subdivide the back half if you've got over 16,000 square feet.
Well, you get two landowners and go and agree, and you can put what is it called?
Yeah, like a subdivision or something.
Subdivision with a.
Yes. Which, again, this is where we balance property rights. Some people would argue, I should have the property right if I have enough room, and if I want to buy a couple lots to divide and make a subdivision, it's allowed in your code. Other people may not like more housing, but again, that's a balance that we play when we're doing planning, when you're doing code. Where is the line between the good of the whole? And some people could argue the good of the whole is more housing. Some other people may argue the good of the whole is we keep it just the way it is. Some would argue my property rights mean I shouldn't have to have people build things next to me. Other people's property rights should say I should be able to divide as much as I want. So our job is to find as best we can the overall. I mean, I've had developers not developers. I've had people who own property in Milton who are very upset that they can't, well, why isn't it 5,000 like some other city? And this is what we are. So again, we're trying to balance both of those sides and come up. Like I said, it's not one that the Planning Commission has actually, we've gone through these slides a couple times and it didn't get brought up or discussed with any questions or comments. That may change tomorrow night, but so far there hasn't appeared to be any concern or either that or maybe they just didn't recognize it. But they have the same information you do. We've gone through this with them and we'll see what their recommendation comes out.
Okay. To me, there's just a whole lack of information. Where's the analysis? We should know that. What are the pros and cons? That kind of thing. You should know that information before you present it to us so that we can make an informed decision. That's what I'm saying, that I don't have
hear your
enough
take.
information
Yes, I
to
hear
make
your
a sound
understanding.
decision on this.
Any other questions, comments from council? Okay.
Go on to the next page.
Oh, yeah, we're not done.
Sorry.
Sorry, on to the next page.
Just a couple more. There's not a lot. That one just got a little deep. Again, if I'd have printed this right, you could have been like able to look side by side. Sorry about that. So page, we'll go with the bigger numbers because they show up better. 9 shows what the existing bulk table is. So this is the building, where the building can be, how high the building can be, that its setbacks, that kind of stuff. So on page 10 is what we're proposing. I will say that the UMX, that's the new one, that's the Uptown. The current proposal with Planning Commission is to make the maximum height 55. The idea being that as since that is supposed to be the higher intense and we are allowing a higher density, that a little bit of one floor of height would be needed to meet those. So again, so one of the things that we have added in the proposal that Framework has added is this idea of a maximum building footprint. Part of it is to sort of, it does help kind of in those mixed use residential, it keeps the bulk of the building down. So if, let's say in the multifamily, so maybe they can theoretically put 4 buildings on a piece of property. Each building's footprint would be maxed at 4,000. So instead of having one gigantic building, it would make them sort of chop it up into smaller buildings, which makes sense since multifamily is sort of in between lower residential and like the urban mixed use. It sort of puts that in between. So it sort of shrinks the building size. Now they could have multiple buildings to meet their density, but it's going to shrink that footprint, which means there's also going to be more room for things like pathways, landscaping, that kind of stuff. So that's a new thing that we are proposing. Also in the mixed use town center and what we're calling the neighborhood commercial, there's this idea of maximum setback from right away for principal structure. The Planning Commission has had a lot of discussion on that, so I don't know. There was some concerns with that, so we'll see where that comes out tomorrow night. But the idea being that in those kind of mixed use, and honestly, the urban mixed use, because the Uptown, because it's controlled by the Uptown design guidelines, has the similar idea, is that you, traditional or planning experts will tell you for those things you want the building up front because it's pedestrian friendly. You want to see the windows, you want to see what's in it. So the recommendation is to basically say the building has to be up close to the street, and then you put the parking to the side and the back. So you're not just seeing parking lot and then a building in the back that you're not sure what's there. So that's something that's new as well. So is there any questions on that section?
Councilmember Peretti?
A couple things. So you were using the phrasing maximum building footprint, but that's actually a maximum building coverage line item on the chart?
So there's a maximum building coverage, which is the percentages. So are on page 10.
Yes. And then the
Then
footprint
there's maximum
before.
building footprint.
Okay, so my question on the colors of your columns here, are these titles going to eventually match up with what you have on your large?
Yes, I apologize. Again, they were trying, again, there's always that transition, and I realized after I sent these that it has the old terms, not the new terms.
Okay.
So yes, it would be NR1, NR2, urban residential, yes. So I apologize for that. Anything going forward will have the proper terms.
Thank you.
Okay, so then, let's see, 10 I did. Yep, okay. So in here it talks about that we've been discussing parking. A couple things came out of the last meeting. One was that parking is a very huge topic, and we don't want to we agree that there are things that we feel like we need to get adopted by the end of the year. There are things that we want to come back to next year when we have more time. One of the things that came out of last week's meeting is that other than things that we absolutely have to adopt under state law, we will bring those back to Planning Commission and Council. But we would like, the Planning Commission next year would like to tackle that whole chapter as its own topic. Because there's a lot of, again, there's a lot of things that are outdated, that have changed. We've talked about allowing, coming up with some things that people can do parking plans. So the feeling was that there are a few things that we are required to put in for parking, but otherwise we're not going to change it by the end of the year. We're going to come back next year and have that as a primary topic to go through. What that does mean is some of the items in the parking table and some of the items in the new use table that will brought to you won't match, but it'll work we'll be able to make it work until we can get that all aligned. So all that to say is the bulk of that we're not going to mess with right now. And then some other updates. So just the city has previously adopted the emergency housing and transitional housing regulations with recent numbers and recent examples and input from the Department of Commerce. Some of those regulations will be changing slightly. That goes the same with accessory dwelling units. There are some things that we now, that you can or can't do, so we have included those. And then, like I previously stated, there's some bonuses for religious organizations. There's also some bonuses for if you're in like a mixed use zone and you're redeveloping a building, there's some bonuses for residential units. So again, all of those are going through the final stages with Planning Commission, as well as just refining the new zones and updating all the old zones. So again, it's a lot, and I know it's going to feel like a lot when I bring it all back to you, but I wanted to at least start hitting on things and getting the idea that there's twofold. And I'll leave you with this unless there's any other questions. When it comes, so the comp plan, we're only allowed to amend once a year. I do expect, because we're required to get it done by the end of the year, it still then will need to be reviewed by Pierce County Regional Council. There may be comments that come back from the state. So there might be some things next year that we'll need to amend, but we can do that. So I think we're sitting really good, but we will have that opportunity. Same goes for the zoning. We're trying to get the bulk of what we feel like makes sense to make sure it meshes with the comp plan. Because some of the complaints I heard coming out of like churches and different things is that the comp plan kind of said one thing, but the zoning code never got meshed with it. So we're trying to do the big ones, and then we have a list, the Planning Commission and myself there are things that we know that we want to work on next year. And like I said, there's also some certain areas we want to do some sub-area planning on. So it's not done with the end of the year. It's just that first chunk, and then we will keep working on those other things that are related.
Any other questions or comments for Planning Manager Stalnaker? Councilmember Strader?
Yeah, you applied that unless it was state mandated, you weren't going to do any changes on the parking. Is that the issue?
Yeah, so the parking chapter, so until we get the parking chapter sort of mimics the use table. Well, we're editing the use table, and so till we get that done, it's hard to edit the parking, as well as parking in general. It's been, I think 2009 might have been when we did most of those. Things have changed, parking changes, there's new terminologies, there's no options. So we really felt like the Planning Commission really would like to make that a focus topic next year. So anything that we have to do, there's some things with ADUs, there's some things I think with middle housing, so those will come forward. But it's just know that next year we will be digging in and we will bring that back in a much fuller revised document amendments next year sometime.
So this is a very complex issue, would you not agree? This whole thing, very complex. And I'm just wondering why you wouldn't apply that same reasoning when it came to everything else within it, unless the state's mandating it. Why would we make any change? And if you still want to do that, could we just get the information, what the basis for that decision?
So the other issues when it comes to housing, that has been the focus of topic, both with the Planning Commission, and we've had several presentations at the City Council. So all of the changes related to housing, the zoning, making sure the zoning matches the future land use and those policies, those have been the focus at the Planning Commission level. So it makes sense that as much as we are trying to get to that last little bit, and there are little things that will carry over into next year, we feel very comfortable that those make sense. And it's tempting, I know, I can understand how it's tempting to say, well, let's just do what the state does. But it's a great opportunity to really look at beyond what the state specific requirements are, is look at what the vision is for the city. And that's what we have tried to do from the consultant, staff, the Planning Commission, is some of these are outside of state mandates, because part of the state mandate is to look at your comp plan, to look at your future land use, and say, what is the vision for the city? And so some of the changes we made is because the Planning Commission felt like this was a better vision for the city. Well, then the zoning needs to match that. And so huge chunks of these we've been working on for months and we're very comfortable with. The parking was sort of, it was sort of this last minute shoot. There's a lot more in here than simply changing out zoning names. And so it made sense to carry that into next year because we felt like we could.
Well, I'll go back to the 60-foot lot minimum. That's not a mandate, right?
No, and if the Planning Commission chooses not to recommend it, then they won't. If they choose to recommend it, then the City Council would have the choice on whether or not they want to support it or not. That's where each of those, it's a suggestion that has been made by the consultant and staff. And again, part of it is and again, if I have time, I will see and I will ask them if they have the numbers of what the average lot width is in the city, because you have asked, I think you feel like that would be helpful, and I'm happy to see if we have that. But it is something that we feel would be beneficial. And so if the Planning Commission is the recommending body, if they choose to, as a majority, recommend it, we will bring it to council that way, and then council will have to decide if they're comfortable with that change or not.
Okay, in your plan, do you have building standards? Is there a vision for? Do you have a mission statement, like what is the vision of the city, which way to go?
Everything. So the comp plan has the vision for the city. It has all of the policies. It has the goals. Those have all been presented, asked to be reviewed. That was that link that everybody could comment on. So all of those are there.
Okay. But you don't have a mission statement or an overview of where you're trying to get, anything like that?
We do.
We have the entire document.
Okay.
I mean, the entire comprehensive plan document is that. It's the overall vision, which I can send you or I can look up, but it also then subsets it. There's a whole element on what the housing visions, goals, policies are. What is their transportation? Making sure that our capital facilities mesh are sufficient. So everything we're doing is integrated in that document, and that's that top document. And then this is the underlying. Now, there's not going to always be nothing in the comp plan says make it 60, but it does talk about making housing more affordable, making it, balancing that. And so it's an option for the Planning Commission to consider, and then it'll be an option for the council as a whole to consider.
Okay. Well, my request would be that we add building standards into this, if we could.
I'm not sure what you're.
What do those houses need to look like?
So you're asking for design standards for
design standards, yes,
houses? That is so. There is a design chapter. Usually there's not, I mean, yes and no. That is something that could be, the council could ask the planning commission to do next year as part of their work plan.
All right, thank you.
Any other comments from council? Okay.
Thank you.
And this, can you remind me, comes back in December?
So the plan schedule is that the public hearing and the full comp plan and zoning amendments would come to the first meeting in December, which is the 2nd. And then it is planned to be on the agenda for approval at the special meeting that we're doing on the 9th.
Thank you for clarifying that.
And thanks,
reminding me.
Tricia, for mouthing me the dates.
All right, well, seeing that all of our items have been concluded this evening, we will adjourn this meeting at 5:06 PM.